Hi, everyone. I'm Hartford Healthcare's Tina Varona. Thank you so much and welcome to this special webinar where we are answering all of your questions about the COVID-19 vaccine, everything from fertility, pregnancy, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine reboot, to just the overall efficacy of the vaccines. And just in time for Colleagues, Friends, and Family Vaccine Day happening this Sunday. Remember, the choice is yours, and we want to empower you with the knowledge you need to make an informed decision. I am so happy to be joined by Dr. Ulysses Wu. He's System Director of Infectious Diseases here at Hartford Healthcare. Dr. Wu, it is so nice to see you. Thank you for stopping by.
Happy to be here.
We appreciate your expertise. Hesitancy, as you know, is very real, understandable. There is some hesitancy still out there surrounding vaccinations. Let's start by discussing the efficacy of these vaccines. How safe are they? You have the Johnson & Johnson single dose, and then you have the mRNA, you have the primer and the booster shot. How safe are they?
So they're very safe. So let's talk about the efficacy. First of all, the most important thing, people look at the numbers and they say, oh, this has X percentage efficacy, this has better Y percentage efficacy. The main goal of these vaccines is to take a potentially deadly disease and turn it into a benign one, turn it into a cold. And we know that the vaccines help with that. What they do is they prevent hospitalizations and they prevent deaths. And that has been shown in all the studies. Now, with regards to safety, there's been a lot of press about the vaccines, and there's always been a lot of press about all types of vaccines as well. But these vaccines are safe. Now, the Janssen or the J&J vaccine certainly got some press associated with the clots, and that's going to contribute to some vaccine hesitancy. But the scientific experts have weighed in, and they've said that the pros outweigh the cons, and so the risks of not getting the vaccine far exceed, much greater than anything that could be associated with the vaccine itself. And so the vaccines are safe, and that's why we're giving them out.
I think for some people, though, when they hear, that Johnson & Johnson did get some negative press, and it was in a small amount of people that had experienced that. But how do people get past that just can't seem to get past the negative press and that very real hesitancy that their mind is made up?
Right.
Despite how safe it is and the numbers and what we've seen. How do you get past that?
It's a great question. And the best answer for that is the negative press is actually good because it shows the transparency of the system. They could have easily just said nothing at all and just kept giving it. But the fact that they had an immediate pause, that people were looking at this every single day, they're scouring the data every single day to make sure that the safety is essential, that's actually a good thing. A lot of people criticize them actually for having a pause in the first place. And the pause probably was unnecessary because I think in the end, they reached the same scientific conclusion that they had reached before. But the fact that there was a pause shows that the system is in place to make sure that these are safe at this point. And so I can understand that it contributes to hesitancy, but the fact that there was a pause should actually eliminate the hesitancy a little bit more because nobody's trying to pull the wool over one's eyes.
Well, and I also think, the alternative too, once you are protected and you are vaccinated, you look at the alternative, and getting COVID, and you've seen firsthand the effects, the devastating effects that COVID can cause. And really here, there is no rhyme or reason how COVID affects different people.
Correct.
You see people with comorbidities getting it worse, but then you see perfectly healthy people that get it just as bad. So let's talk about that interesting sort of contrast between being vaccinated versus the alternative.
Right. And so that goes back to the first thing that I said. Getting vaccinated, what it does is it turns a deadly disease into a mild disease. We all have COVID fatigue. We're all tired of COVID. But if you remember, just not so many months ago, we were losing the equivalent of a 9/11 every single day.
That's right.
And that's what people don't remember. And I'm going to say that again to let it sink in. 9/11, that's how many lives we were losing every single day due to this disease. And so if you look at the ramifications of getting the vaccine, as opposed to thousands of deaths a day, it's not even close. It's not even close. And you can see what's happening We're not out of the woods yet in the United States, but you can see what's happening in India,
Right, right.
where there's millions of cases a day,
Hmm.
and who knows how many deaths?
Yeah.
Well, people know how many deaths, a lot.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, the vaccine works,
Hmm.
but we tend to focus on, oh, what did the vaccine do bad? But look at all the things that vaccines do good,
Right.
and that's what's important.
I think another area where people might be hesitant in getting the vaccine is the long-term effects that
Yep.
we simply don't know.
Hmm.
And also the speed at which these vaccines were developed typically
Yes.
doesn't happen in 9 months. So let's talk about sort of the speed of the vaccine, the timing of it all, and what do we know long-term, if anything?
Yes. So long term, so no virus is being injected into you. So there's no risk of getting sick
Mhm.
from the vaccine itself due to a virus. Uh, this has been studied for over a decade. And this was just the appropriate time to develop something.
Mhm.
And it's a very agile way of producing. Well, we're talking about mRNA vaccines, but
Yep.
at the adenovirus vector vaccines like the AstraZeneca
Yep.
and the Janssen or the
Johnson. Yep.
J&J, they've also been studied as well. So this is not new.
Mhm.
It's not like Tesla just came out with their car yesterday.
Right.
That had been under production and under development for decades at that point.
Mhm.
And so this is not new. And I can understand that because of the way that it was, I don't want to say rushed through, but the speed
Mhm.
to which it was done, it just really shows you when we put our heads to it, you know, we were in a crisis,
Mhm.
and this is what was developed, and this is what they needed to do. And when they got around to it, they did it.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. It's safe.
Absolutely. I want you to explain mRNA. You know,
Mhm.
that's something new that we have not been used to or we've heard of or accustomed to. Explain the process of the spike protein, how this mRNA works, if
Yeah.
you can sort of give us that physiological aspect of what happens when this vaccine enters the body, because I think that's critical because the second dose for many people, I've heard comments like, I felt like I got hit by a train, I
Right.
was knocked out. Why does that happen? And is that the body's natural response that you're building up those antibodies
Yeah.
against the disease? So, if you will, give us sort of a science lesson in terms of breaking down the mRNA
Mhm.
vaccine, what happens, and why do we see these effects from the second dose?
So the effects aren't necessarily due to the vaccine itself. I'll
Mhm.
go very briefly into the
Mhm.
science because I don't want to confuse
Mhm.
or cloud really
Mhm.
what the vaccine does. But basically, what they're doing is they're taking this when they inject it into your body. It's causing your cells to reprogram. They're causing to not change the human body,
Mhm.
but to produce proteins as if the body was exposed to the virus.
Mhm.
And so that's what the cells are doing, our natural immune response. So what they're doing is they're manufacturing an immune response. And so why does that turn into, why do I feel terrible when I get the second vaccine? Or in my case, it was actually the first shot.
Mm.
I felt terrible after my first shot. The second shot, I didn't feel a thing. So like you said, everybody's different.
Yeah.
But when you mount that immune response, you're not supposed to feel well because your body is in overdrive producing these immune cells at this time to help protect you.
Mhm.
And so I'm a little worried because I didn't feel a single thing. I'm like, am I
Right.
protected? But
Right.
so that's why people don't feel well with the second shot or even with the first shot. That's your immune response working.
And let's talk about some of the symptoms that you can expect and how
Mhm.
long could you expect those symptoms to last?
Sure. Arm pain for sure.
Mhm.
You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
probably up to 50% of people feel that arm pain. You just
Mhm.
feel sore,
Yep.
like you've been punching me in the arm,
Yep.
like you normally do. No,
Yep.
I'm kidding. But then you have the systemic side effects,
Mhm.
such as, you feel lousy, what we call malaise.
Yeah.
You may have arthralgias, which is your joints are achy,
Mhm.
myalgias, your muscles are achy. You could have a fever as well. Some people develop a local rash at the site. Some people even more rarely develop a rash even later, even though they didn't develop one at the site in the beginning.
Mhm.
Should not last more than 24 to 48 hours.
And if it does, you should seek
You
your
should
doctor.
probably
Yeah.
seek some help. I mean, it can go all the way up to 72 hours. And for some people, we look for vaccine reactions up to 10 days actually afterwards. But by and large, most of those, what we call systemic symptoms, go away within the first 2 days.
2 days.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. A lot of myths out there, and a lot of people even, searching the web and
Yeah.
probably not a good thing to do
Yeah.
because there are so many sites that you just don't know what you're reading. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on, what sites are important for people to go to where they can get credible information in terms of like the CDC. But pregnancy, a lot of myths
Yeah.
surrounding pregnancy, infertility. We do have a question from one of our viewers. I'm planning a family and I'm concerned about the effect of the vaccine on getting pregnant. What are the risks? That's a great question, and that's one I'm sure you hear a
Hmm.
lot of.
Yes, and so they're absolutely right. Well, let's take a step back. There's a lot of stuff on the internet,
Hmm.
and you've heard me say this before. Sometimes when science goes against the internet likes to win sometimes.
Right.
So if you search the internet enough, you know that the Earth is flat
Hmm.
and that dinosaurs never existed. That is out there,
Yeah,
and
of
it's
course.
really hard to combat that because
Right.
I cannot convince anybody who
Mhm.
believes the Earth is flat that the Earth is really round. So with the vaccines, this is a little bit different. I say that a little tongue in cheek because vaccines, obviously, we worry about
Yeah.
the misinformation out there because it could have an effect on, getting a vaccine could have effect on our health. When it comes to pregnancy, I will not deny it. They absolutely did not do studies currently, or I shouldn't say currently, previously with pregnancy and the vaccine. Now, people did get pregnant during the course of the study. And looking at those patients, they had all done well. There was no untoward events. There are currently vaccine studies in play right now that they're looking at the pregnant population. But that being said, they monitor thousands of pregnancies of people who have already gotten the vaccine in the vaccine adverse effects. So there's a database for this. And there have been really no major side effects with the newborn or the mother when it comes to vaccines and pregnancy.
Would it be different if you were actually injecting the virus into you? Would that be a different outcome if in terms of pregnancy or infertility?
I actually think that that's a great way of putting it because this goes back to what we said before. The risks of contracting COVID while you're pregnant are much greater
Hmm.
than the vaccine itself. And that goes back to the J&J that we talked
Right.
about in terms of the risks. When you're pregnant and you contract COVID, there are complications that can happen, even death associated with it.
Yeah.
And certainly, the world has lost people as a result of the virus itself. So you weigh the pros and the cons. It's never 0 or 100%. And that's what people are looking for. It is always that gray area. But
Right.
even when you look at the gray area, the pros of getting the vaccine when you're pregnant are much greater than the cons, or as opposed to the pros of not getting vaccinated when you're pregnant, because that is very low. There are very little pros because if you get COVID while you're pregnant, it could result in many different comorbidities, including death
Mm.
as mortality.
Very serious. We have another question from one of our viewers. Will breastfeeding after a COVID vaccine harm my baby?
So great question. And right now, the studies have shown that it will not harm the baby. And actually, there may be positive studies. So they've looked at people where they've looked for the antibody response or the immunity in things like the umbilical cord blood, and they found antibodies there. But they've also found antibodies in the breast milk as well.
Mhm.
So it could actually be the exact opposite, where it may be somewhat protective as well. So it is not harmful, as far as we know right now, to of the vaccine affecting breastfeeding.
Yeah. Let's talk about infertility. You hear myths that the vaccines can cause infertility, both on the side of men and women.
Mhm.
What do we know at this point?
As far as we know right now, there is no infertility associated with the vaccines. And this goes back to the thing that we're talking about. There is a system in place where we are evaluating this.
Right.
And if it gets to that point where, oh my goodness, infertility is an issue, there's going to be a hard stop. There's full transparency with this.
Mhm.
Right now, though, the data does not support infertility for men or for women.
Another hot topic and another big question is vaccines. Can they cause pregnancy loss?
So that's a very good
Mhm.
question. And so when you look at the actual rate of pregnancy loss
Mhm.
as compared to the vaccine,
Mhm.
so we're talking pregnancy loss, irregardless of COVID, regardless of the vaccine itself. It is still higher
Mhm.
than the vaccine itself. And
Mhm.
so the problem that with that is that we have to prove causality. Is the
Mhm.
vaccine itself causing the pregnancy loss, or is it just due to the higher rate of just people unfortunately losing their pregnancies? And so right now, there's not an association.
I think for also a lot of people looking at the vaccines, they did receive emergency authorization
Mhm,
use from the FDA, but for some people, that's experimental. That's not the finality of it. That
mhm,
hasn't received final approval yet. And so for some people, that's just not good enough
mhm.
that the emergency
Yeah,
authorization use is in place. What do you say to folks who think that way?
yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. We want to see what happens in the long term.
Hmm.
But the safety protocols are in place for this to happen. This is not something that was rushed out. This is something that had been talked about for a long time, decisions pondered for a long time before any of this was done. And so in the long term, I feel that the vaccines are going to be safe, but we already know in the short term, if you get COVID, it's bad.
Yeah.
It
It's
can be bad.
right. Right.
So we already have that data point, but we seem to not remember that COVID is bad.
Right.
It's kind of like, you go back to like seatbelts. Remember when we had to make
Hmm.
seatbelts? It's like, well, I grew up without, having to wear seatbelts.
Right.
And then you look at it and it's like, well, there are a lot of people who got into car accidents who didn't do so well when they didn't have seatbelts. We
Right.
didn't need to study that
Hmm.
as much per se. And now here we are decades later saying that seatbelts are probably pretty good.
Right.
I cannot beat time. I know that 40 years from now we're going to know more about these vaccines than we
Mhm.
do right now.
But there are still some people that don't wear seatbelts. So I
That is
think
correct.
that's still one of those things. Let's talk about herd immunity, and
Yeah.
let's sort of flip the narrative here. So people who don't get vaccinated, it keeps us further from
Hmm.
gaining herd immunity. How important is it for us to have herd immunity to stop the spread of this virus? Let's talk about the herd immunity aspect of
Yeah.
it.
Herd immunity applies not only to COVID, but
Mhm.
obviously to a lot of things in our life, whether it be, measles, mumps, rubella, all the diseases, chickenpox, whatever it may be.
Yep.
I think that's a great question. Herd immunity is essential, not necessarily for our protection. That is a side benefit. But
Mhm.
what we need to do is we need to stop the cycle or the circle of transmission. Because what's happening now is that the coronavirus is replicating, and each time it replicates, it changes. And so
Right.
you hear about the mutations as well.
Yeah.
And so we really want to knock this replication down to almost zero to stop the replication, to stop the mutations from happening. Herd immunity will certainly help do that. And so it is very important in terms of vaccinations. And we've seen some good data actually. State of Connecticut,
Yeah.
shout out to State of
Mhm.
Connecticut. We're doing pretty good.
Mhm.
We have a lot of people that are vaccinated,
Yeah.
and we see that our rates are decreasing. We see that rates are decreasing also across the country, and I can attribute that to the vaccine itself. Are we at herd immunity? No, I don't think we're close, but
Mhm.
we're getting there.
Mhm.
And the more people that we need that we can get vaccinated, or even those who just get the coronavirus itself, that contributes to herd immunity as well. The closer we can get to breaking this vicious cycle or
Yeah.
vicious circle. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the way we are right now on track here in Connecticut, if we continue on this trend, on this right trend, when could we see herd immunity if we continue the way we're going?
Well, unfortunately, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but
Hmm.
there's still a lot of vaccine hesitancy,
Yeah,
which is why I'm here.
yeah.
I would love to see herd immunity once we reach 90%.
Hmm.
I'm not sure we're going to get to that number, whether
Hmm.
through natural immunity or the vaccine itself.
Yeah,
And then we have to worry about, how long will the vaccine last? Do we need to get boosters?
right,
Will we ever get off of this hamster wheel at this point?
right.
So I don't remember what question you just asked, but
Yeah.
I think with herd immunity,
Hmm.
we certainly need to get there.
Yeah,
When are we going to get there? I don't know. I
yeah.
don't know. I would like to get there before the fall though, because I do know that, when the fall comes, the colder weather comes and we start clustering back inside,
Mhm.
transmissions are going to start shooting up through the roof. So I would love to get the herd immunity before then.
Okay, very good point. We have a question from a viewer: with multiple strains of COVID, will the vaccine prevent against the strains we know of? Thanks for the question.
That's a great question. So let's go back to what viruses are. Viruses are going to virus. That's my states. That's what I say. So what do I mean by that? They are going. Some of them are going to mutate. They mutate
Yep.
every single day. Some of those mutations mean absolutely nothing, and some of them are consequential. So we are following what we call the variants of interest and the variants of concern. And the ones that are of concern are the ones that we have to worry about when it comes to transmission, when it comes to how bad it's going to affect somebody. Long answer to your short question. The vaccines we know right now of the variants that are circulating in Connecticut at this point, the vaccines work against those. But there may come a time where the vaccines won't work against all of those variants, and we're always looking out for that.
Well, and I think to put it into context too, look at how long influenza has been around. And every year that it comes back in the fall, we see different strains of it.
Correct.
So is that sort of the same thing here with viruses?
In a very loose way, yes, absolutely, because they're going to change, because they're replicating at a very a very high rate. Let me put it that way. And it's serendipitous that we're actually talking about pregnancy, because imagine giving birth to 1 million babies every single day. They're all going to be different.
Right.
And not necessarily due to mutations, but some of them are going to be due to mutations. And so that's what's happening with viruses right now. And again, going back to the internet, if you don't believe in Darwinism, this is Darwinism as we see. The fittest will survive in the end. And that's what's happening with the viruses right now.
All right, another question from a viewer: is there a better vaccine for pregnant women to take? I'm sure that's a question you hear a lot of. Which could be better for pregnant women, or are they all the same?
I'm not going to say that they're all the same, because we still need to collect that data.
Yep.
But as of now, they're kind of all the same at this point. And my recommendation for vaccines is, what is the best vaccine for you, whether you're pregnant or not? It's the one that's in front of you, the one that you can get right now. That is most important.
Absolutely. Another question, again, pregnancy, just a really hot topic among the hesitancy, I think, and a lot of people on their minds out there. Another question: if you're pregnant and take the vaccine, does it increase your risk of a stillbirth?
So that goes back to the stillbirth, same thing with the spontaneous abortion. So you look at stillbirths, you look at the data of stillbirths, regardless of COVID or the vaccine itself, and there's a certain rate associated with it. The vaccine itself is lower than that rate. And then we have to prove causality that the vaccine actually caused this, or was this something that happened naturally as a result? So it's the same as the spontaneous abortions as well.
I want to talk about in terms of immunity and how long it will last. You briefly touched upon that, but there are, questions. Am I going to have to get a booster shot every year? What do we know at this point? Because, to those who were vaccinated in December or January, December is pretty much almost right around the corner again. So it might be time to get that booster shot again. What do we know at this point about that follow-up?
So right now, as we are about 6 months, well, maybe a little bit less of vaccine data, we know that it will provide immunity for 6 months at this point. So in 9 months, we're going to know it's going to provide immunity probably for 9 months. In 12 months, we'll know probably for a year. After a year, we're not sure. We may need to get a booster, but some people have projected that it may protect us for even 2 to 3 years. But we may need boosters for variants. We may need boosters because the immunity is just waning at this point. And so, if I had to put my Karnak hat on, I would probably say Karnak is probably a reference that people probably won't get. But if I had to look into my crystal ball, I would say probably about a year. But I wouldn't be surprised if it lasted a little longer.
A good segue, another question from one of our viewers: will COVID and flu vaccines ever be given as one shot? Could they be combined?
That's a great question. It depends how long we're going to be giving these shots for. Yeah, I would say in 1,000 years, they could probably be combined. I say that tongue in cheek. Probably in the short term, no, because they are delivered in a different way and they both have different technologies. So probably not in the short term. So for those of you who may be needle hesitant, I'm sorry.
Yeah. They're here to stay. Insurance, when it comes to undocumented, the shot is free. You will never be charged. If you have insurance, your insurance may be charged, but you will not get a bill. If you have no citizenship or other information is collected, immigration status is not an issue. If you are undocumented, we still want you to get the shot. It's free, it's safe, no questions asked. Don't believe us, do your research. But if you still have questions for those folks out there, where can they go? And we talked about this a little bit earlier, we touched upon it, but where can they go to get credible, viable information and arm themselves with the knowledge they need to know that this vaccine is safe for them?
Correct. No pun intended. Arm themselves?
Arm.
Yeah.
You
I
caught
saw
that.
what you did.
You did. You're
This,
sharp.
the CDC.
Yeah.
They're much smarter than me, and I'm not a smart person, but the CDC is the place to go. I mean, there are people who are researching this all the time.
Mhm.
They look at the data.
Mhm.
It's so much more than any of us could even hope to say that, in our cursory internet research. And so I would say the CDC and even our state, because the states also derive a lot of their information from the CDC as well.
Mhm.
The CDC is to be trusted. I would trust our state data at this point. And so go to our state, the DPH website, or go to the CDC. I think those are two of the best sites.
Yeah. Dr. Wu, final thoughts.
Sure.
We're talking about hesitancy. We covered a lot of ground today, a lot of the key topics and issues that people are still struggling with.
Yeah.
Even after this discussion, if they're not quite there yet, how do you get them there? What are your final thoughts? What do you want to say to the viewers?
We have to step back from the COVID fatigue, and we have to remember when COVID hits us, it kills. We have to remember that.
Mhm.
We are so focused on the side effects of the vaccine, which we should be,
Right.
but it pales in comparison to what coronavirus can do to you. And not just even the short term. If it doesn't kill you, we hear about the long haulers.
Yeah.
The people who have persistent, unfortunate COVID symptoms, even in the long term. Or if it doesn't even affect you at all, you're asymptomatic, you pass it on to a loved one. And even the vaccine will decrease that. So we have to, they're apples and oranges, but we have to look at it that the pros and cons, the risks of the vaccine are much less, way less than getting COVID itself. And the vaccine is safe. The minute it doesn't become safe, we're going to tell you. We're fully transparent about that. Well, I'm not going to, well, I will probably tell you, but the government, the CDC,
Right.
they will tell us when it is not safe. But right now it's safe for you. It's safe for the pregnant population. It's safe for all ethnicities, all races, all genders at this point. And the children's studies, the kids' studies are going to be coming out soon.
Yeah.
There's been some good data. And so it'll be safe for the kids as well.
Mhm.
And like I said, the minute it's not, you will be told. You will definitely be told.
Right. And, and I think to put it in your perspective and bring us into your world just a little bit, obviously you're on the front lines. You have seen the devastating effects that COVID can ravage through a person and families. I don't think you could say it enough. What you've seen and what you have been through. You have seen the other side that many of us have not been privy to. So I think coming from you, that's a validation in terms of listen to what you're saying, hear what you're saying, and empower yourself. We really appreciate it, Dr. Wu. Thank you for spending some time with us and answering these all important questions. Of course, Colleague Vaccine Day is coming up this Sunday, May 2nd from 9 to 4 p.m. at 5 locations. While appointments are recommended, walk-ins are certainly welcome. We thank you for joining us today. We hope we answered your questions, and if not, please feel free to still ask your questions. We will get them to Dr. Wu and get them answered. I'm Hartford Healthcare's Tina Varona. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you real soon, but for now, be well.